we'll start. Jenny's going to come. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Jack. Most of you know me-ish. I'm an ecosystem director here at Intersect. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what's coming up. So not quite, a bit more tactical and what people should be expecting to happen in the next sort of, from now actually until maybe June-ish time. Okay, I'm going to press this to see what happens. There we go. Okay, yeah. So what's coming in Q1? This will also go out into Q2 a little bit. Okay, so there we go. Match my slides. So we have three big things that we are going to be deciding very shortly, and this is nothing new. I think we spoke about this before briefly. Hey, Jim. First thing we're going to be doing is ratifying the Constitution, the delegate-approved Constitution, and we're going to be starting doing that next week. It's going on chain next week. So it's pretty exciting. I mean, we just ratified the deployment hard fork. That's going to be enacted on Jan 29th as we cross the epoch boundary. And then literally moments later, it might be a day or two later, we are going to be submitting the update to the Constitution on mainnet. And then that will run for approximately 6 epochs, depending on whether or not the thresholds are met before that point. And that's really the first time that DREPs are going to be voting in this new world. It's quite exciting. It's one of the huge decisions that we're going to be taking, the first one as well, which is cool. Somewhat in parallel, we're also going to be looking at the net change limit, which essentially is setting the withdrawal limit for how much we can tap into the treasury next year or in a given period. And that will essentially, it's an info action, and it's going to determine whether or not a budget action or budget actions, info actions related to the budget, are constitutional or not. And really, it's about deciding how much we want to utilize for future growth and development. And then third, related to the net change limit, of course, is the budget. So what do we want to fund as ecosystem priorities in 2025 and beyond? So this is all stuff that we're going to be talking about. Oh, I've gone too far. This is all stuff we're going to be talking about in now until April. So it's pretty big stuff. It's not easy, and we've not done this before. I think there's a recollection of that point that this is all new for Cardano first. So it's super exciting, also a little bit anxiety inducing, but we'll get there. All right. So let's just quickly talk about the delegate approved Constitution. I think there's a few of you in the room here that were at the convention. I can see a lot of people there. Yeah. So actually, hands up. Yeah, hands up. Who was at the convention? Nairobi or Buenos Aires? I was in Nairobi. Okay, cool. Yeah, good. So, sorry, the text is a little bit small there. This is not news to you then, as a whole, really. Point is, it's been a large consultation period, 6 months or so, of the draft text being taken through 63 workshops, 1,400 participants overall, and we've come up with this delegate-approved Constitution in Buenos Aires and Nairobi. 95% of delegates approved it, as we all know and remember. It was cool. It was a really cool event. I mean, just from an event perspective, it was pretty phenomenal, all things aside. And what's really important is some of the next steps and the future work streams meme is a real thing. Ken is here actually from the committee that is elected at the convention to work on those work streams, and Cash as well. So I won't go into the detail there because Ken might want to touch on that as well. But essentially, we are going to work on the Cardano papers, which is sort of a nod on the Federalist Papers from the US Constitution build out. And I think that's super exciting, actually. And I can't wait to see what Ken's talking about a bit later. Okay, so we're doing that. As I said, it's going on mainnet next week. And it's the first thing the DREPs are doing. So it's pretty exciting. And hopefully we can get that approved, and we will be replacing the interim constitution. So the interim constitution is live now, and it's all good. It's been working really well. The guardrails are pretty solid, and they maintain the security and stability of the network within those safe ranges. The guardrails are pretty much staying the same. I'm pretty much sure the guardrails are the same, but the interim constitution itself is changing with the delegate approved one, if DREPs want it to. Okay, so that's next week. Then, when is this working? Oh, there we go. Okay, net change limit time. So this is where we start to get into the business end. and I say the business end because it's where we still haven't got agreements. We still haven't got a place where the community are really comfortable with what's being proposed, because I haven't proposed anything actually, which is going to happen the next sort of couple of weeks, like in parallel to the constitution, as I said. So let's talk about this a little bit. Let me just see if I can get this across. Here we go. So just what is the budget process? As a bit of a backstory, stepping back. Really, it's been about getting as many members involved in shaping what the ecosystem priorities should be for 2025. And not just members, actually, just everybody in the community. What should we be funding in 2025 and beyond? Lloyd's been doing a stellar job getting this process from actually starting it off and then getting it to where it is today. So thank you, Lloyd, for everything you've been doing. And it's obviously part of the budget committee with other members. And then there's just been a lot of people involved. And really, the objective is, as I've written here, is presenting a budget for the Cardano community to review and approve, and addressing the ecosystem priorities, ultimately accelerating the development and advancement of Cardano. That's what we want to do. And deployment upgrade has been a remarkable feat on first try with 2 hot fixes over Christmas. Incredible. Really. And I didn't think there was part of me that was worried about it was going to get done or not. But we did it. And obviously that's much more of a technical thing, and it was largely understood because SPOs have been upgrading for many years. So it's not necessarily new, apart from SPOs having to now vote, which was the new thing. But we did it. We got it done, and the ICC were mobilized very quickly within 1 epoch and did everything. So it was really phenomenal effort. And now we want to maintain that momentum because we're at the cusp of Cardano being something that is just phenomenal for the industry, for just the global systems we see today. And it's one of the things that has always united us as Cardano people, is that narrative that we don't like the legacy systems that we have today. We don't. They need to be revitalized, as Tam said, updating the system. Okay, so let's move to the next bit, which is just a bit on the consultation period. So we did publish this about a few days ago. So you can log into our blog post and see the latest news on how the consultation period has been going for the budget. So it started in October. Lloyd did a presentation in Dubai with Lawrence, bringing together sort of the early ideas around how we're going to formulate this process. 5 buckets emerged, which I think is a really cool way of identifying what those priorities are in a nice way, so it's clearer. We've had 15 open community calls, but more than that actually now. This is slightly outdated. With members and non-members, really important that Intersect isn't seen as this gatekeeper or this singular institution that does this stuff, because ultimately we're a permissionless system. Intersect can play a role and is playing a role, but it is a role. I think that's really important to stress. On top of those open community calls, we've had DREP participation, and there's 700 odd DREPs now. 150 of those DREPs have 1 million ADA or more delegated to them. And so there's a thriving community of delegations happening with DREPs. We need to do more on it though, because we've only got about 5 billion delegated currently. A large chunk of that is to auto abstain, just to be really clear and transparent on that. So we need to do more. We want to get that to really 10 billion, I think, is the target we want to hit. It does represent 25% of staked supply, which I think is a nice, I mean, I look at it as staked supply as one of the metrics, because I think that really demonstrates active participation in the network. You could look at circulating supply and then you could look at total supply, but I think staked supply is the right check mark on where we are with the health of DREPs. But anyway, there's more to go there, and that's a side point. We also ran a survey, which was super interesting for me as well, that we picked up quantitative and qualitative stuff, as they mentioned that in the fireside chat earlier. We had 200 plus people come back on the survey giving their feedback. A lot of it was fairly common to us, and I'll go through that in a bit. It picked out core priorities and focus areas that we want to work on, and then also how we need to structure these asks to the community. How are DREPs going to be deciding this stuff? And we had a lot of feedback, and Lloyd will attest to this through the open calls, about what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And it's really informed the place we are today. And yeah, last point here, and I said this just a minute ago, but it is one route to the Treasury funding. That's quite clear from the Constitution, that multiple budgets can be proposed from multiple different organizations and individuals as well. There is no gatekeeping here. I think that's super, super important. Okay, so feedback on priorities. This is cool. So the first two priorities, number 1 and 2, were core infrastructure and research and development. So I think that was just really nice to see. I think people want to invest in the core infrastructure. We want to advance what our infrastructure is. And the key things that came out really, Ouroboros Laos, naturally, it's not necessarily new. Bitcoin interoperability, and that was also linked to a little bit to the Bitcoin OS theme or phase we were going through as an ecosystem. I think we've probably gone up another level from Bitcoin OS into just general Bitcoin interoperability. But nevertheless, that's a key thing. Research and development, as I said, is something that is number 1 and 2. So we've got strong proposals for those actually through the technical steering committee. I'll get to that in a second. The next on the list, marketing and ecosystem growth. We had a lot of opinions about what we should be marketing Cardano as or not marketing Cardano as, where we should be marketing, different audiences, different regions, really, really nuanced. Everyone has an opinion on this. And I think it's really difficult actually to come up with a sort of unified view. But I know that the Rare team are going to be talking a little bit about that as well from the event side. And just on that point, actually, with the Rare team, we've been working really hard on bringing together the key institutions of Cardano to form a new marketing committee. So we've had a marketing working group running for about 8 months. They've done a really great job in forming the foundations of a strategy for marketing Cardano in 2025. But now we've got the CF, Emergo, IO, and Rare, and the marketing group to come together and form a marketing committee, which is just awesome. So finally, we've got everyone in a room working on this committee from across the core institutions on Cardano. So it's awesome. I'm really excited about this. The next thing, innovation and grants, moderate support. I think there's lots of really good feedback from the community on what we should be funding from an incubation perspective. Catalyst is a good example, and we'll be voting on Catalyst funding and what should Catalyst have next year. So that's a good one, this year, sorry. And then regulatory compliance and governance. This is more linked to governance tooling, supporting on-chain governance. What kind of tools do we need for DREPs? And we heard a bit about that earlier as well. So those are the sort of 5 priorities, and they are ranked. So yeah, as I said, 1 to 5, and that is the order of what people really felt like we should be funding this year from the Treasury. All right. So the key takeaways in terms of the process and then the authorization of the budget. So one of the big pieces of feedback we heard is that we don't want to do one large budget. The community don't want to vote on a 200 million sticker budget in its entirety in one go. And I think that I resonate with that quite strongly too. And so we are going to be proposing multiple smaller budgets. So DREPs will be voting on core infrastructure. They'll be voting on research, be voting on Catalyst, we'll be voting on marketing, and 5 or 6 buckets, depending on how we break it up, but roughly the 5 funding tracks or buckets. And each funding track, as I said, will have its own info action, and Treasury withdrawals will follow those info actions if approved. For again, a second vote on that particular Treasury withdrawal for that particular bucket. So what we could be looking at is 10 votes actually from DREPs on the budget priorities. So that does put. I mean, there's worth being cognizant of. That's quite a lot of effort for DREPs. 10 votes to do, 10 things to look at instead of one large thing to look at. But ultimately, I think this is the first time we're doing this. I think we owe it to the ecosystem to do it 10 times. Get it right, or work to get it right. Next year it's 5 times. Maybe the year after that it's 2. Or maybe next year we look at CapEx type investments that are taking 2 or 3 years development, and then more OpEx related budgets that are 1 year. So we can look at this. Obviously, it's really important that we maintain adherence to the Constitution. So that's a really key thing. But ultimately, the point is that there's going to be multiple opportunities for DREPs to say, I like this or I don't like this, and they can have that independent vote. There's no guns to the head, and there's no major ultimatums that people have to sort of take here. So I think that's really positive. The other thing here, net change limit. So the proposal for the net change limit will be, I think I can say this, Lloyd, 350 million ADA. Now, this number is picked out because it is the projected income for the Treasury in 2025. If we did nothing today, the Treasury would grow by 350 million ADA. If we spend 200 million ADA of a budget out of that net change limit of 350, the Treasury at the end of this year will be bigger than it is today. So it's pretty cool. I mean, when we look at it like that, when you paint it in the bigger picture, we're actually still protecting, no matter what, we're still protecting the core of the Treasury value that we see today. And ultimately, if we could spend 200 million and still have more money in the Treasury at the end of the year, that's pretty cool. I was about to swear. I won't because we're on live stream. But it's pretty fucking cool. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited about that, and I think it's an easy thing to get your head around that we're still protecting that 1.6 billion in the treasury, regardless of what we do, with a net change limit at 350. It's cool, but I'm open to different feedback and ideas on this too. The other big bit of feedback we had, and this is back to the permissionless system, we must leave ample headroom for other budgets to come through on chain. Intersect cannot and should never soak up the entirety of the net change limit. It's not in the Cardano ethos. And it's also something that I don't want Intersect to do either. I mean, frankly, as an employee. So that's really nice bit of feedback, and it is something that we're doing. The other really cool thing that also came out of the Constitution Convention is the use of smart contracts, helping obviously for on-chain variability, but mainly for the use of checks and balances. I think there's a big nervousness, and this is why I said at the beginning, the anxiety-inducing thing about what we're doing now, all these decisions. We want to use smart contracts wherever beneficial, because it's going to help us have better auditability, but also checks and balances with how we're withdrawing from the treasury and also how those funds get distributed. I'll touch on the tendering process for this, because I think that's the next bit. Cool, we want 200 million for funding priorities, but how is that 200 million then getting into the hands of projects and the builders on Cardano and of Cardano next year, this year and into next? So we also want to, there's other little things that came up in the convention, which is really interesting. If we don't spend 200 million and we've got money left over, or the value of ADA goes up and we've been accounted for different rates, what do we do with surplus ADA? Does it go back to the treasury? Is it being used for a different budget potentially, with as long with consent from DREPs? So there's lots of different ideas here, and I think we're still not quite there yet with an idea of how that can work. But ultimately, that is that's a future problem. It's a future dilemma. Not that far away, but it is a future dilemma. And then, as I said, we must make sure that everything that we're doing here aligns to the Constitution. It's really critically important, of course, to do that. All right, those are the key takeaways from the consultation period that we ran for about 3 odd months just gone. I would add, though, that when we proposed the net change limit with the overall budget, that helps provide the context. So when the net change limit is proposed, there'll be an overall budget that you'll see as one doc that will show the 200 million odd ADA. I think Lloyd's, correct me. Okay. Thank you. So roughly 200 million, just for context setting. And then, as I said earlier, the actual voting on those budgets will happen independently per funding track. Okay, let's carry on. All right, so talking about our tendering process. So just as a step back, I mean, some of you did get funding from Intersect this 2024, and we ran a tendering process there. It was an RFP thing. We had open grants. There was a list of grants on the website. You would apply. It would come to me and my team. We would look at it with neutrality and impartiality. And that's one of the reasons why Intersect is here, to be a counterparty and have those SLA management and risk management on contracts, making sure they're delivered, they're to value, they're to spec, they're on time, but also being open to members. Any member can apply for funding at Intersect, and that's really, really important. There are obviously only a handful, but we've got to be really honest about this, there are a handful of companies that have the capability to be a core infrastructure dev, right? And we know that's the truth. So when you do a capability assessment, there are only a handful of companies that are going to do that. We did that in 2024. There was about 12 continuity partners, we called them. And essentially, those were the guys that carried on the work for delivering Chang and Plomin, people like Twig, Gawa, Well Typed, IOG, of course, the CF, a bunch of different organizations that formed part of that work in 2024. We want to expand that, because with 200 million, and we're going to be hopefully investing that if approved, then how do we revamp our tendering process so that A, still matches our principles of being open, fair, transparent, neutral, and impartial from a decision-making perspective. So it's not committees deciding who gets funding. Committees are deciding what should be funding, or proposing what should be funded. In terms of who does the work, that's up to me and the team here to have a really clear decision matrix and framework for why we've decided this vendor over vendor B is a better one. And then our framework is then vetted by committees as well. So it's sort of that neutral, transparent process there. We also want to build a couple of tools, because we're going to have this scaled up. We distributed, I think, 3.5 million ADA in 2024 as part of our grants program. We are obviously going to not 10x that, but 6x that, something like that. Yeah. So it's a significant scaling of that. So we do need to have some better tooling at Intersect. So we're developing a tendering process in the members area. So you log in. Well, anyone can see the work that you can do on Cardano. So imagine that you just come to Intersect or anywhere. It doesn't have to necessarily be Intersect. Anywhere that's an approved budget, and you can see all of the items that are needing to be done, and you can apply as a member to do so. And as long as you hit the qualifying criteria, you're in the chute for getting funded to do that work. The other thing we really want to do as part of this tendering process is something that it's been a bugbear of mine for a while, which is really incentivizing participation at Intersect. We've had thousands of volunteers, lots of hours being spent doing, for nothing, to be frank. There's been very limited reward apart from the odd occasional bit of recognition. It's not enough. It's not good enough. And I do feel like we can't rely on goodwill. We'll lose people. It's not necessarily saying that you're going to be able to make a lot of money, but it's recognizing that efforts count and we should be rewarding people's time. So we want to build bounties in here, bounties from a repo management perspective, definitely. So we want to have bounties on core Cardano nodes problems. If we get bugs, we should be able to incentivize finding those bugs. Mike Hornan did a really good job over Christmas. And that's core infrastructure bounties. What about marketing bounties? What about someone to do a use case on, I say this all the time, but a use case on BMW because they've got a connection at BMW in Germany and they want to do a use case on Cardano? We need to produce that material. But I don't know how to produce that material for BMW. I'm not an automotive expert. So we need to be able to distribute that out and get someone to fund and do it, right? It's not huge amounts of money either. It's just recognizing the time and effort. So we want to work on that. We're building those two tools via the members area in Q1. And that's how there's a process happening right now. We need it to support the budget process. And ultimately, whilst Intersect is the professional team have to maintain that sort of neutrality and impartiality, committees always have the check-ins on, is the work happening the way we want it to happen? Are we, as Intersect staff, managing our own processes properly and fairly and transparently? Are we doing what we say we're doing, essentially? And we're going to have those regular feedback loops with committees to make sure we're being held to account. And I always like being held to account. So, yeah, it's good. Okay, so that's our tendering process. Lots to come there. And essentially there'll be PRDs, RFPs, and in the UK, we have a public directory of work you can do for the national government. And if you click on that, there's like 100,000 different contracts for national government in the UK. And anyone can apply for those contracts. Ultimately, in the UK, similar to the US, probably, there are a handful of companies that get that work all the time, like the big four management consultants. It's probably not that dissimilar to the US. We don't want to do it like that at Cardano. We don't need to do it. There are plenty of capable firms out there that are much, we can go to the hundreds and thousands of firms working on Cardano this year and next. All right. How much time? I don't know what the time is, but that's fine. Okay, so a little bit more to look forward to on top of all of this. So that was mainly sort of Cardano specific related stuff. This is a bit more internal. We are going to be publishing our financial report in February of last year. So we're aiming to do our sort of for every annual reporting for Intersect's internal operations about 2 or 3 months following the close of the year. So we want to be really quick with getting that out to say this is how much Intersect cost to run and this is where funding went. We also are going to be preparing for elections in April for committees. So we elected 50% of the committees in October, as some of you remember. We'll be doing the other 50% in April. The marketing committee will also fall into that new election cycle too, which is super exciting. And we'll then by April, we'll have 100% of our committees elected members, chosen by members in that one member, one vote dynamic. So which I also think is a nice little counterbalance to our state-based system, which means that anybody at Intersect, anybody in Cardano can actually really have their voice heard because it's one member, one vote. It doesn't matter how much data you've got. As I said, improving members onboarding is part of the tendering process, but really it's about, and Jenny's banged on to this about me a lot. It's when you join Intersect, where do you go? What do you do next? And it's not great. So we need to fix it. We need to make it better. We also need to have better onboarding with people with one-on-one calls. Like, okay, you do this, right? Let me connect you to this working group over here, this channel on Discord over here. This is where you can go and do X, Y, and Z. And we need a bit more of that hand-holding, but we also need to scale it. So we need some tooling. We'll be looking at how we can do that through AI as well. And there's lots of different options we can do there. We are also launching a project incubation program for open source projects on Cardano, which is also really cool. It's quite a similar model that you see with Apache or other open source foundations, where they will fund and support projects that are open source and they would like some member-based sort of structure around maintenance of repos and that kind of thing. We've got a white paper on this as part of the open source committee out already, so you can look at that online today. On top of that, we want to do an accreditation program, and this is a little bit back to, it's a small reference to the bounties for core infrastructure. As I mentioned before, there's about 20 or so firms that are really capable of working on core infrastructure. It's been a really great, there's a fantastic report from Bitergia that shows the evolution of development commits to our code bases. From 2023, IOG represented 80% of commits on core Cardano node. In 2024, it's 55%. And that's just really super positive. Can we get that? And it's not actually about IOG doing this, I should be frank. It's about everyone doing more. And that's what's really, really cool. So, but we need 100 firms, we need 1,000 firms. How do we do that? And we can use an accreditation program to help find and level up devs so they can work on core infrastructure. And that's something super exciting. And I'd like to get into more details with, particularly on, there's people in the room here that I could talk to about this too. Part of the budget, the larger Cardano budget bit, we want to have quarterly reviews on where that is, transparency with wallets and all of the stuff, where all the money's being held, and just really clear accountability on this. That'll be quarterly. Then we are proposing a plan to elect the new constitutional committee in the summer. So the interim constitutional committee expires September the 1st. So we need to elect a new one. Now, we don't need an organization to do this. Luckily for our system, it's completely decentralized and doesn't require an institution or organizing to do it. However, that said, there is some self-organizing to do. The way the system works, and Sam can probably better describe this for me. But ultimately, if we want to change the committee, which we need to in the summer, we need to submit the current 7 members. It could be more, it could be less. But the current plan, we have 7 members of the committee. They all have to be submitted at once to go on chain and change the. Okay, Sam can correct me then. But one of the points here though is that we ideally want to find our shortlist of committee candidates that have been voted on by the community, and we do one action that updates the committee, ideally. And then we're not flooding the system with too many committee updates, and there's risk as well with doing committee updates. So we're proposing a process. We're working on that with the ICC, the Cardano Civics Committee, but also outside of Intersect, really important. It's a non-members get involved with the CC elections. We did that with the ICC elections. We'll do the same. And if the community approve, we're likely to do an info action on this. So does the community approve this election process first? And that'll be detailed. If it's a yes, then we'll crack on and get that done with some on-chain tooling that we'll build separately or work with partners to do. And then we'll submit that action probably in June or July to allow for onboarding for the new committee so that they come into effect in September the 1st. Something to that. We can work on that, Sam, together. Then we're going to be in Tokyo in April for the Teams event. It's a really cool blockchain AI event. We went last year. We've obviously got a huge audience, Cardano audience in Japan, but that's where things really kicked off for Cardano way back. And so we will be back there to engage with the Cardano community and our Intersect hub there too. And then this is a bit more TBD and it is a bit more funding dependent related to the budget. But having things like this and doing what we're doing today, 50 times over, 100 times over, every 2 weeks in a different place, be fucking sorry, would be awesome. Because you know what, like this, I say this a lot, but on X, you can't have the nuanced conversations. You can't get a point across without it being either an attack, some level of engagement farming, or someone just misunderstanding what's been said. And doesn't do ourselves any services if we keep having those conversations in that environment. The best solution in the interim is having X spaces, but even they rug. So how do we get it? How do we move forward here? So we'll be doing in-person workshops, a lot more like this, sort of more intimate workshops, and that doesn't have to be a huge 1,000 thing either. Okay, I think that is me today. Sorry, okay. Lloyd, I'm putting everyone.
Thank you, Jack. Jack,